I'll move an extension of time to the close of business at this point.
Happy to
Members.
second.
Councillor Simpson, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Contrary,
Aye.
no. Declare that carried.
Easy.
Phil?
That's it. You should be tough, not easy.
Through the Chair, I'm also accompanied by Gurv Singh. Gurv Singh
Thanks.
is the lead for this particular plan change. So I might just do a little bit of an overview. We do have a presentation if members would like to see it as well, which gives some examples of the sorts of things that are proposed in this plan change. So we first appeared before you in March, I think it was, in relation to this proposed plan change. We're coming out of the governing body meeting end of last year. There was a resolution that sought that any errors or mistakes that were identified within the unitary plan were gathered together for a subsequent plan change. So immediately as the plan went into part operative state, we had essentially an email address where people were from both within council and planning consultants and indeed local board members and general public sending through their ideas of things that they believed were mistakes. And we had around about 1,300 line items that came through. We then went through a process of trying to triage these into ones which we could fix ourselves without the need for a plan change. So that's called a Clause 20A process. And there was around about 500 of those, which we were able to resolve in that way. So we've already done updates to the unitary plan to make those fixes. What we're then left with is a number of matters which were what we felt beyond the scope of this particular plan change. So the purpose of this plan change is to make those corrections without actually changing the policy direction that sits within the unitary plan. So we're not looking to enable or constrain any of the actual rules that we've got, introduce new policies or objectives or change directions in any way. So it's essentially keeping on going in the direction we're in at the moment and improving the functionality aspects to the plan. So there were around about 180 line items of the 1,300 that did fall into the category of actually making the plan a bit stronger or a bit weaker or introducing a change in policy direction. So what we've been left with in the middle then is around about 230 line items which are being put before you today to be fixed up, and there's also 400 instances of where there is land that's been vested as reserve in the meantime between when we notified the unitary plan and now. And so for those ones we've worked with the Parks Department to identify what we believe to be the best open space zoning to apply to those sites, and then for the remainder of the 230 I might direct you to paragraph 18 in figure 1, which is sort of an illustrative guide to the types of things that have been identified to be included within this plan change. And in presentation I've got some examples of those as well. So
Thank you, Phil.
maybe we could turn to that. Okay, so I've run through this with you already. Here's an example of a text change within the plan. So this is where we've got an error in relation to a text reference. Here's an example in relation to the extent of place for historic heritage, where the illustration on the left shows that a house which is on the street running north-south was included, whereas the illustration on the right shows that the house with the orange roof there is now to be cut out of it. Here's an example of where there's an anomaly with the zoning, where an existing property has had a zone boundary cut right through the middle of it, which does make it very difficult to be able to do your development. Here's an example which I spoke about in relation to open space, where the little triangle of land has been able to be acquired through a subdivision, and what we've been able to do is to recommend through the plan change that it take on the same zoning as the area of, in this case, informal recreation zone directly to the north. Here's an example which is over in Hobsonville of an area of land through the NZTA designation process which didn't marry up with the precinct boundary. So there's a precinct boundary which currently cuts through some properties, so we need to move that precinct boundary, which is the red line, to take it out to where the green one is to marry up with the actual property boundaries. And lastly, here's an example of where we have, what do we got here? This is a reference to an appendix, so it's a cross-referencing example within the plan of where the wrong titling of the appendix was actually referenced, so we wanted to correct that. So I mean, these are all examples of where the triggers for resource consent would remain the same, and it clarifies where there are any misunderstandings essentially of how the actual plan applies. So, questions?
Thank you. First question is, this was sent out quite in a targeted way to all local board members, but particularly chairs and relationship managers, and their feedback was invited. Has anything come back that you need to tell us about? I did see a subsequent email explaining on how members and relationship managers might navigate the documents, which was very helpful, and thank you, Gerv, I think, for sending that out. So is there any feedback at all from local boards?
Chair, no, there was no feedback. So we've sent you, as well as all the local board elected members, how to navigate through the material. There is a lot of attachments, and also given them some tips on how they can search for certain changes in their local board areas.
Okay, thank you. Questions, members? There being none, I'll be happy to move it.
Second.
Councillor Filipona's got the second. I'll put that motion then. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Gerv. Thanks for the light reading.
A million trees.
I'll move 15.
We'll now move out of
I'll move
the
15.
open.
Happy
Sorry.
to second.
Oh, yes.
Second
Got to
15.
receive.
So it's been moved in
Thing
second.
to
Go
go.
under confidential.
We just need to receive item 15.
That's what I've moved and seconded by Councillor Walker.
Got that? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Declare that carried.